What's going on, guys? So I just hit 10 years as a commercial real estate agent or broker. And if you follow me on Instagram, then you probably saw I did a Q&A asking you guys what you would want to know if you're thinking about getting into real estate. As you guys know, not only am I an agent or broker, but I also do real estate investments and flips and stuff on the side. So if you've been following along on the channel for a while now, then you've kind of seen all facets and all sides of it. So today I'm gonna answer your questions that you submitted on Instagram. We'll see at the end what you guys think, and let me know in the comments if there's any that I missed, and maybe I'll do a follow-up video as well. So let's dive in. Okay, so I kind of picked my top 10 favorite questions you guys asked. There were a lot of them, more than I was expecting, to be honest. But I thought that these were the most applicable and would give you guys the most information. So let's start off with the first one, which is how hard is it to become an agent? So I've done a few videos, which you guys may want to go look at, on how to get your real estate license, and that is definitely the recommended first step. But then outside of that, you got to reach out to all the different firms that you want to potentially apply for. I went through 23 different interviews at, I believe it was 6 different firms, meeting with various teams and individuals at each firm, until I picked the one that I liked the most. I got a couple offers, but I really try to do my homework and figure out the best team for me and the best fit for long-term and who I'd actually be wanting to work with long-term. So I think it's really important to do your homework, do your research, figure out who you mesh well with on a personality standpoint, but also who is performing well in the market. So I guess if I'm just gonna break it down granularly, it's start by getting your license and then apply to different real estate firms that interest you, whether it's residential or commercial, and just start meeting people in the industry, get your name out there, start booking interviews, and from there, you'll start to kind of filter and figure out where you wanna land and what you really wanna target as far as your first job. So that would be my recommendation, and it's not necessarily hard, it's just, it depends how you define that. It's just a long process depending on where you end up and how many interviews you want to do. You know, start with a real estate license. Depending on what state you're in, it can be harder or easier than others. I'm in California. I've heard it's one of the harder ones. But again, depending on what state you're in and how many regulations there are, that itself can be kind of hard. And then figuring out where you want to land can be hard, but actually going through the interview process, getting to know people, that's gonna be part of your day-to-day anyway, so you might as well get used to it. Okay, so now number 2, would you recommend going commercial or residential? You know, this one's really tough because I grew up around residential real estate. My grandpa started a residential firm, my parents were in it, and then I decided to go the commercial route. And I'll even piggyback on that by saying, you know, when I started in commercial, my starting class, or whatever you want to call it, 10 years ago, I believe we had 12 or 13 individuals. And of that entire class, only 3 of us are still around today. So I've heard that commercial is just a lot more cutthroat and it takes a lot longer to, you know, actually become successful in it and really start actually seeing some good income. Whereas residential, it's a little bit easier to get started from what I've heard. Again, I've never gone that route, but I think it's a little bit easier for some people because you can tap into your already established network. You can lean on family and friends who might be selling homes or looking for homes to kind of be your first clients. Whereas if you go commercial, you're working with either major businesses or local businesses. And if you're just starting out, you have really no credibility. So they're gonna be very hesitant to work with you at first until you can kind of prove yourself. And that's why going the commercial route can be so much more difficult. And not only that, but the commercial deals, especially leases, take much longer than the residential deals. So it's gonna be a lot longer to get paid on stuff than going the residential route, which for a lot of people is just a non-starter because they can't support their lifestyle or sustain themselves without income for that long. So my recommendation is if you don't have a good amount of savings built up to kind of cushion you through those first years of commercial, then I would go the residential route because you're likely to see better income initially than you would with commercial. And I also think that it's somewhat easier, and I don't mean easier, but I just mean like conceptually easier to go residential because you've probably lived in a house, you know what a roof is, what a door is, what a window is. There are terms in residential that you will already be accustomed to versus commercial. There are so many terms and acronyms that you will not be accustomed to because you didn't grow up around it unless you own a business. So it's just gonna be a much steeper learning curve for most people, whereas residential, it's a little bit easier to kind of break into. Okay, this next question is, what is the first year like? So again, I can only speak to it from a commercial standpoint, but it's pretty brutal. It is very, very brutal depending on where you start and what you're doing. Again, going back to having no credibility when you first start, you know, you're making phone calls, you're doing outreach, you're trying to build your customer and client base, and for most people, they've never heard of you, they've never seen you, you haven't been on signs, you haven't been on tours, you haven't really proven yourself out in the marketplace. So it can be really, really grueling and really tough those first 6 to 12 months. After 12 months or so, depending on which route you go, you'll start to see some momentum in most cases. And for those that don't, that's usually kind of when they drop out. But again, it's going to be a pretty grueling first 6 to 12 months. And you should also expect pretty grueling hours, which makes it really tough to work like a second job or bring in income elsewhere because you're working so hard to build your client base. I mean, I remember when I first started, I was driving Uber and doing like little side hustles here and there just to try and make some extra income because the income was that bad. But it was really hard finding time to do those, and most of the time it took place on the weekends. So you're kind of working nonstop during the week, and then you're also working on the weekends just to make ends meet. Residential, obviously I can't speak to that because I haven't gone that route, but just looking at my family history in it, as well as friends that have gotten into it, it seems like the income starts a little bit sooner in residential just because they're quicker deals when they do happen. And again, you can leverage the network that you already have. So I don't know how brutal that first year is in residential. Feel like it's probably not as bad as commercial, but yeah, I mean, commercial can be pretty brutal depending on which route you go. And I actually had a similar question come in, which are what are the typical hours? And I'm assuming that's just typical work hours. So I would say this depends quite a bit. So obviously on the resi side, right, you have a little bit more flexibility and freedom during the week because you're doing a lot of weekend showings and tours and whatnot that can really eat up your weekend hours. So if you are somebody who enjoys your weekends, definitely don't go residential because it's gonna eat up a lot of that time. You will have more flexibility during the week. A lot of my residential friends, they can kind of go to the gym whenever they like during the week, or they can go to a coffee shop or do whatever they'd like during the week because most of their deal making happens on the weekends when everybody buying homes is off work. The opposite is true for commercial. So for commercial, it really truly is, like a white collar, when you're first starting out, I mean, you're probably in there at like 7 a.m. and you're leaving if you're lucky at like 7 p.m. The hours will get a little bit better as you get more senior. But when you're first starting out, the hours are gonna be pretty grueling. And honestly, like there were nights where we were there till 10 p.m. or later. If you haven't seen the video yet, I did make a video on what it's like to be a commercial real estate broker. So if you wanna watch like a true day in the life, and granted, I'm a little bit more senior now, so the runners, as we call them, or the junior agents, they aren't gonna have the same flexibility as what I have in that video, so keep that in mind. But again, with commercial, your weekdays are gonna be a lot more rigid. They're gonna be very client focused. If you have clients on the East Coast, you work on the West Coast, you're gonna have to wake up early, or vice versa. If you're on the East Coast and you have clients on the West Coast, then you're gonna have to work late. And it's just about every night, it makes my wife angry, but just about every night I'm in bed answering emails and following up on things, after about 8 p.m. for about an hour. So you really don't have much downtime during the week. On the weekends though, with commercial, you're not working that much. I'll check email, I'll respond to stuff, maybe take a phone call here and there. But for the most part, I've turned it off and I'm focused on family, friends, and enjoying the weekend. Residential, complete opposite. You're having open houses, doing showings, meeting with clients who otherwise work during the week. So it's just, it's a completely different schedule. And I think you need to ask yourself, which one do you prefer? All right, before I dive into the next question, I did want to bring up that I'm going to start one-on-one coaching. I've had a lot of people reach out asking about questions about getting into real estate, and I've taken a lot of calls and meetings already. So I thought, you know what, why not open up one-on-one coaching to help you guys out? Don't have a website up yet, so if you want to DM me on Insta, we can certainly schedule something. But in the future, there will be a link below in the description of this video, as well as a link on the homepage of my YouTube channel and on Instagram. So feel free to book through there if it is up and working. But for now, in the meantime, feel free to DM me and we'll figure something out. But I definitely want to help you guys out and tell you everything that I can because there is a lot more to get into real estate than just these 10 questions. All right, so let's keep rolling. The next question is, what income can you expect when you're getting into real estate? This one is a little bit tougher to answer because again, it's gonna be very different for commercial and residential, especially in those early years, but I'm gonna try to answer this the best that I can. That being said, if you do wanna schedule one of those one-on-ones that I was just talking about, then I will give you the actual numbers that I saw. But for the purpose of this video, because it's so different across the country and depending on what state you're in, let me break it down like this. So again, going back to what state you're in, obviously real estate values are substantially different across the country. You have the eastern and western states along the coastline where you have pretty solid residential and commercial values depending on which one you're looking at. Then you have the Midwest and parts of the South and other areas of the country with less population density where housing values or commercial real estate values are much more suppressed than that compared to the Eastern Seaboard or California, for example, or even Hawaii. Now, the reason why I point all that out is it's really important because as a commercial real estate agent or broker, you're usually getting paid a percentage or a defined fee based on the sale price or the lease value of whatever deal it is that you are closing. So if you think about it, if you're closing $1 million deal, and it's a 3% commission, then you're making $30,000. $1 million deals are very common in New York and California. I would say it's almost harder to find one less than $1 million than it is to find something over $1 million deal. Whereas if you're in a state with a much smaller cost of living, maybe like Louisiana or Mississippi, then maybe a $500,000 deal is more applicable. And if you're making that same 3%, well, your commission just got cut in half to $15,000, right? So depending on where you are and where you're trying to get your license, that is going to dictate your income to a degree. The size of the deals that you take on and close are directly related to how much commission you get. So I know that that's a pretty broad answer, but let's unpack it a little bit more. I would say with commercial, when you're first starting out, you should expect to make basically nothing for the first 6 months at least. The next 6 to 12 months, you will probably see some income start to happen, but again, it takes a while to get those deals closed on the commercial side. Whether it's a sale or a lease, if it's a lease, it's probably gonna take even longer. Like the typical retail deal in California right now, for example, from initial LOI to lease signed is about 8 months. Then you have the build out period where they need to build out the shop, and then they actually have to open the store. You don't get paid usually until they open. Sometimes you get a little portion of it at lease execution, but let's just say for sake of conversation, it's 100% upon store opening. To give you an example, I did a deal back in 2018, still haven't been paid on it. Today, 2025. It opens next year. So that just kind of shows you it can take a long time for commercial to get paid. And it's not uncommon for fees to take over a year from start to finish. With residential, it's not unheard of to have 21-day closes, 30-day closes, 45-day closes. So if you get something lined up pretty quickly, or maybe it's a family or friend that's buying something from you as a residential real estate agent, early on, then you might see income within that first month or two. That is pretty quick. I don't think it's gonna happen that quick, but you never know. I have heard of it happening. I think more realistically, you're probably gonna see income probably around that 4 month to 6 month mark, whereas commercial, you'll start seeing your income pick up around the 12-month mark. So it's just a little bit different structure depending on which route you go. I will say this though, and it's probably true for residential as well as commercial, just talking to my buddies who are in residential. Once you kind of start hitting your milestones with clients and you start actually picking up more and more clients, and you're kind of getting that snowball effect where you're starting to really build your business, I would say after the first 12 to 18 months, you can expect your income to double or triple every 12 to 18 months. And I don't think that's unrealistic. I personally had it happen to me. All of the people that started with me who are still around had it happen to them. So it's not uncommon to have your income double or triple pretty frequently after you kind of get the ball rolling. But the last point I'm gonna make about this question is, again, if you're going the commercial route and even the residential route to a degree, you really need to have some savings going into this. Like, I'm telling you, you are not gonna make much at all, if anything, when you're first starting out. If you're starting out purely commission-based with no salary or income backstopping you, then it is really eat what you kill. And it is going to be very grueling for you. So you really need to have some savings going into it. I had saved up, I think it was like $12,000 or $10,000 going into my current job. And I was only making like roughly 25, 28,000 somewhere in there the first year, which in California is basically nothing. I actually got mailers that said that I qualified for food stamps at the time. So, it was really, really brutal. And I'm glad that I had my savings, but I also needed to really rely on those side hustles. And not only that, I got a really cheap, tiny little apartment with some friends where I took like the worst room in the entire place and paid the least amount that I possibly could. And even then I was still eating bean burritos and PB&Js every now and again just to get through. So again, just really have some savings going into this. It is not an easy business when you're first starting out because again, you have no credibility and you really got to build a name for yourself. Okay, the next question is the work-life balance okay? So again, I mentioned that video that I did showing you guys kind of my work-life balance these days. And I've kind of already touched on this a little bit. When you're first starting out, it's gonna be pretty rough. As you build your client base and as you become more senior or even go out on your own versus being on a team, you'll have better work-life balance. And it's really up to you to kind of dictate your schedule because it's gonna be your clients and you're gonna have to answer them when they need help with something or have questions. And then when you have downtime, you can choose whatever else to do, right? It's a very entrepreneurial business. You eat what you kill, so you get what you put in, right? So the more you work, probably the more upside you're gonna see on your income. Whereas if you're taking a lot of time off or not putting in the hours, then it's probably gonna impact your income. So just keep that in mind. But I would say work-life balance isn't really applicable to this job because it changes all the time. No 2 weeks are the same, and it's really what you make it. So you can make it a great work-life balance, or you can make it a terrible work-life balance if you're working all the time. So it's up to you to kind of set those parameters. Okay, so question number 7, if you could go back, would you do it again or something else? Looking back, yeah, I think I would do it again. I mean, I really enjoy what we do and everything that comes with it, including, the investing side of the business, which you get a lot of really good data and insight into working as an agent. But I also think that times have really changed a lot since 10 years ago. I mean, technology has really evolved for better or for worse. And I also think that depending on which area of the business you go into, you're going to see a lot more success these days or a lot more failure than you would 10 years ago. For example, like looking back, I don't know if I would go the retail route again. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely love it. I love learning about restaurants and all these different retailers and how they operate and the business plans behind it. I think it's super cool. But retail deals are relatively small compared to industrial or maybe multifamily. So you have to do a lot more volume to make the same amount of money that somebody who does industrial or something else would have to do to make basically the same or even more. I think the office guys have had a bloodbath since COVID, but it's starting to finally recover. So, there's some hiring going on in that space. Industrial's been a little iffy the last year or so, but it's starting to come back. Multifamily has been pretty strong for the most part, depending on where you're at. And then residential has obviously taken a hit with rates. But again, I mean, the internet isn't going to replace the need for residential. People need a place to live, whereas the internet does replace certain retailers, which makes my job particularly tough. Because you'll have a retailer close all stores and just move online. So now it's not a client anymore. So, there's different pros and cons to each route, but I think if I were to do it all again, I would probably go industrial, maybe multifamily or office. I don't think I would go the residential route just because I grew up around it. I already kind of knew enough about it to be dangerous. And I wanted to challenge myself to do something different. I think if I hadn't grown up around residential, then I'd probably be a lot more likely to go residential just because I think, homes are a lot of fun to sell and be around, and flipping homes is fun, and that whole world is a lot of fun, and I know a lot of people in it. But I think for me personally, I wanted the challenge of doing something different than my family did and kind of seeing that through. So I'm glad that I went the commercial route, and I think it really just depends on what you're personally interested in, what you want to get into, and really think about that, because whatever you choose is probably what you're going to be doing for the rest of your career. So it's really, really important to pick a path that interests you. Okay, number 8, somebody asked, are you worried about AI agents? Yeah, this one's really tough. I'll say this. I mean, if you look at Zillow, they tried kind of the AI agent to a degree where, they would buy the home for you, from you, without really even any research, and that kind of crumbled. They've also had, online agents try and sell homes for people. That hasn't really evolved to a place where I think it's commonplace or people want to rely on it. So I think there's still a ways to go, but I know the AI is evolving incredibly fast, and I do think there will be AI agents that are successful relatively soon. I think the big difference is if you've never bought or sold a home before, you're probably more inclined to use a real person versus an AI agent, just because the process can be pretty cumbersome. There's a lot of questions that come out of it. And for a lot of people, it's the biggest expenditure of their entire life. So, not only does it have a lot of a personal attachment, but financially, there's a lot of attachment to it and making sure that the deal goes right. And I think that would cause some hesitation for people to jump into using an AI agent. That being said, I think if you're somebody who's done a lot of real estate deals before, then you might be a lot more comfortable using an AI agent to help you buy something or help you sell something if it's a process that you're familiar with. For example, we're selling our house right now, and I could probably handle the entire sale myself. I just don't have access to the MLS or the documents because I'm on the commercial side. So if I had an AI agent that I could lean on to do all the documents for me, I could probably do everything else myself and get it sold. Now I'd feel pretty confident doing it, right? But I've also bought and sold a lot of real estate, so I know the process. If this was my first time ever buying a condo or buying a house, then I probably wouldn't use an AI agent, at least what's out there today, because I would want that real person to help, come to walkthroughs, point out issues with the property, get eyes on it, make sure it's a good, smart investment for myself or my family. There's just a lot that goes into it, and I think if you're new to it or if you haven't ever bought it before, then I think AI is going to be a little bit scarier than just hiring a real person. I think for sellers, AI might be interesting if it's a discounted rate for selling, because I think that's where a lot of people get hung up, is when they go to sell their home and you have an agent taking, 2 or 3%, then they're like, oh, wow, I'm not getting as much out of it as I thought I would. So I could see it coming into play there. On the commercial side, I think AI, and it already is starting to make impacts in the data analysis and trade area and market analysis. I think we're gonna see a lot more of that, where AI is getting involved with the reasoning or the rationale behind doing a location or moving your office here, or maybe it's analyzing drayage costs to put an industrial building somewhere that makes sense from a distribution standpoint. I think AI is gonna get very involved with that, and it's gonna be able to compute and analyze things a lot faster than human agents can. But I don't necessarily think that it's going to be negotiating the deals, because I think there's a wealth of knowledge and also just a benefit to having those personal relationships that brokers and agents have with landlords, with leasing reps, with sellers, that AI can't yet replace. And also on the residential side, I mean, AI is already helping write, home descriptions and condo descriptions, and we're seeing that on the commercial side too. So I almost see it getting like intertwined with the agents and brokers out there for now. It's not to say it's not going to replace in the future or replace certain transactions that otherwise would have been human-based in the past, but I don't think it's going to be a complete takeover, at least for a while. That being said, AI is moving extremely fast. I think it's extremely exciting and also to a degree scary, depending on what you look at, but I think it's also really exciting. So I think agents that aren't taking advantage of it are doing themselves a disservice. And I also think that all agents should be keeping an eye on it, because you never know what's going to come out or evolve. So I think it's definitely worth keeping an eye on. Okay, number 9, what are splits mentioned in your other videos? So this one, I guess I should have probably talked about this more in the other videos, and apologies if you watch those other videos and been confused. Splits refers to 2 different things. So splits could be the commission splits within your team. So if you're on a team, maybe one guy brought in the business, he's getting 50%, and you have 2 other guys working on that account and they get 25% each. The other side of splits, and the one that is probably more important when you're looking for a job, is the split with the brokerage house or the house. So the house split can be as bad as 50-50 or even worse. Unfortunately, where I work, it's pretty bad. And it can be as good as 96% to you, 4% to the house. And what it is you're basically paying like your desk fee or your fee for working for this company. Real estate agents and brokers are independent contractors. You're usually 1099. You might be W-2 when you first start out if they're giving you a small salary or pay. But for the most part, you're going to switch to a contractor role. Even though you're working for the company, you are technically not an employee, you're a contractor. So you have to pay your overhead to the company. And it's different for every company. The bigger ones have worse splits because they've built a brand for themselves. You're kind of leveraging their brand. Like if you work for CBRE, JLL, Colliers, one of these bigger guys when you first start out, again, you have no credibility. Nobody knows who you are. So when you're first starting out, you're really leveraging these big brands to say, hey, I work for so-and-so company. You guys see them all the time. I have credibility because they hired me. Whereas more senior professionals tend to leave or go to smaller firms where the splits are a lot better, because they're trying to attract those brokers and agents to make the switch for the higher splits. So when you start out, you might be starting at one of these bigger firms with terrible splits. Then you might move to a firm with better splits where it's like 90-10, for example. So you're taking home 90% of the commission, they're taking 10%. So on a $100,000 deal, you're getting 90 grand, they're getting 10. Whereas at the bigger firms with like a 50-50 split, you're each getting 50%, you're each getting 50 grand. Okay, and number 10, which I thought was a really good question, but I wanted to save it for the end, which is, should you join a team or start as an individual? I always recommend going the team approach, because you're gonna basically have built-in mentors who can help you through the process. When you're first starting out, there are gonna be so many questions you have, so many acronyms, so many spreadsheets and documents and processes that you need to learn and make sure you're doing correctly for your client. You have a fiduciary duty to do the right thing for them. And if you aren't representing them in the right way because you don't know what you're doing, then you are breaking that fiduciary duty. So it's really important to make sure that you're servicing your clients appropriately, you're getting them the best deal, and that you're also watching out for them. It's funny, we're not lawyers, but you do kind of read legal language quite a bit, and you have to be aware of it. You can't give your clients legal advice because you're not a lawyer, you're not a practicing attorney, but you should be able to identify when something doesn't look right and have them, basically flag it for them and say, hey, you should talk to an attorney about this. So you wear a lot of different hats as a broker. And when you're first starting out, you may not recognize or see a lot of that. And so being on a team, getting the training, getting the hands-on experience, shadowing them, joining accounts with them, maybe helping out on a few clients with them. Not only is it going to help ramp you up in the business quicker, but I think it's also going to teach you things that are very, very important when you're servicing your own clients down the road. And it might also help your income, because if you're lucky and you get on a team that wants you, for the long term and sees potential in you, they might start bringing you in on their own clients, and you might start getting small commission checks quicker than you would have if you were starting out on your own. The only way I would start out on my own is if I grew up around it or knew a lot about it, or I was joining a firm where it just made sense for me culturally, or it was covering an area that I really wanted to work and there weren't any teams available, but I wanted to get going on the business, right? Maybe you're looking at a small firm, no teams are hiring right now, so you got to go out on your own. Well, in that case, it is what it is, right? You got to kind of start. But in most markets, in most areas, there will be at least one team hiring, and you should find that team and start with them. Doesn't mean you have to end with them, but loyalty is pretty important in this business. So you should always be looking at who you want to be with for the long haul if you're going the team route. But my recommendation would be to go the team route, because I think it's just going to lead to a much smoother onboarding process than it would as an individual. All right, guys, well, that is all 10 questions for today. If I missed anything, let me know in the comments below. Maybe I'll do a follow-up video. And again, I'm going to start doing the one-on-one coaching and consulting calls, just a quick Zoom call. You can book it from anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour, and I will basically clue you guys in on everything you want to know. You can ask me questions that weren't answered in today's video, as well as anything else you want to know about real estate. I'll try and answer for you. So again, there will be a link down in the description below in the future to book, but for now, you can DM me on Instagram if you'd like to book it. But that's it for today's video. Thanks so much for watching if you made it to this point, and I'll see you on a future one.